everyone, and welcome back to Politics Relaxed podcast. Another huge people all wanting to express their opinion because we've had a very big week in politics. This week we're going to be focusing on America because of all the things that went down in the Capitol, and of course Donald Trump and his role that he played in that. And it's been really shocking, and I don't think I ever expected to see this in any politics. But I do want to get onto that. But first I want to talk about Georgia because one of the lesser remembered things of Wednesday was the two Georgia runoff elections, which changed the state of play for Biden, which means he can now get, he can make a lot more legislative change because of this power, because he now holds the House and the Senate. Does anybody want to start and talk about how this is going to change the state of play for Biden and how it's going to shape his premiership? Piers.
Okay, well, early this week there was the Senate election in Georgia. Georgia's a bit different from other states, so they have special Senate elections, and it was obviously between Democrats and Republicans. I believe it was a man called Warnock versus Loeffler, and Perdue versus Ossoff. Ossoff and Warnock being the Democrats, Perdue and Loeffler being the Republicans. I mean, in terms of the events that went down on the night, Warnock pulled ahead pretty quickly. It was a bit closer with Perdue and Ossoff, but eventually both of Dems won, which gives the Democrats control of the Senate because Kamala Harris is the deciding there because it's 50-50 right now. Well, it's 48-50, but the two independents are with the Democrats. But what this means for the Democratic Party is, and Joe Biden, it means they can do a lot of things a lot quicker. And well, I mean, there's pros and cons of that. Pros is that Mitch McConnell is out and he's not the Senate Majority Leader anymore, so he can stop interrupting everything. And also, Biden can do more things. Cons, Biden can do more things. Is that necessarily a good thing? We'll have to see. But yeah.
But a lot of people are talking about the flip in Georgia because before it was two Republicans and then it's now two Democrats. So Georgia has flipped, and it flipped in the presidential election. So it's going to be, and that is where a lot of the time the Republicans sometimes center their election campaigns sometimes around that sort of area. So will it change very much when we go into the 2022 elections for the Senate and for the House? Caleb?
I mean, I don't really think it affects their chances in the 2022 races any more than Biden getting elected did. It's always the opposition party that's at an advantage in the midterm elections, and I mean, even though Democrats will have a simple majority. That they'll get judges through, they'll get cabinet members through, but as far as legislation goes, not much is really going to be passed because that would need 60 votes, and right now they only have 50 plus the tie-breaking vote with Kamala Harris.
And that's
so I don't think they'll be able to pass any particularly controversial legislation. But I mean, unfortunately for the Democrats, they had a lot of opportunities in this in the 2022 in the 2022 elections, and now they're at a disadvantage. So they could end up losing seats in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. They're going to have a hard time defending Georgia in 2022. That race, special election, only 2 years for Raphael Warnock. Also, they have Arizona as well. So. Yeah, they're definitely at a disadvantage in 2022, but I don't think having the Senate really it changes much of that. If they had 60 votes in the Senate, obviously it would.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're going to be at a disadvantage. But having a simple majority is still a lot better than nothing.
Yeah, of course, but that is a very important thing to remember this, because they need that 60 seats to pass anything major through, and I think that's one of the things we have to remember. But credit to a lot of the people who've been crediting this Georgia swing to a lot of the black voters and the people on the ground who have pushed this turnout for the voters, because it was a record high turnout for elections, not excluding the presidential one. So it was really remarkable what we saw in Georgia. But now, of course, I want to get on to what we all really came here to talk about, and that is, of course, the Capitol riots. Would you call them that? There's been a lot of words being thrown around, coup, riots. Some have even called them protests, which I think is very very soft for what was actually happening. People smashed windows. They got inside the Capitol building and inside the two chambers. So people also brought inside zip ties, so they could have been trying to take hostages. Maces, guns, Molotov cocktail snipers, and pipe bombs were found in people's cars. So this really was a riot, and it could have been even worse if the police hadn't got there in time. But again, there's been big criticism of the policing there. The Capitol Police Department, the chief of that resigned. Another thing to remember is 5 people died during this riot, including one policeman who was just 40 years old, and he was killed by one of the protesters, which is shocking. And a federal murder investigation is now underway for that, which is truly shocking. And a lot of this blame has to go down to Trump. Trump was there an hour before. He was speaking to these protesters and he was riling them up. And if we look at some of the things Trump has said in the past, to the Proud Boys, he said, stand back and stand by. Well, they've obviously stood by, and now they've come back out. And the Proud Boys were there on Wednesday, and so were QAnon supporters. This is crazy far-right support for Donald Trump. He said good people were on both sides of Charlottesville, and he said to these rioters, who went inside the Capitol building and destroyed things, got inside Nancy Pelosi's office and wrote letters to her. We love you. You are very special, he said to them. And Rudy Giuliani said to them before, trial by combat. This is absolutely shocking what Trump has done. Jose, I want to turn to you first to try and defend maybe these protesters, or maybe you won't.
To be honest, I won't defend them because Republicans here, although I'm a Trump supporter, Republicans here are being extremely hypocritical. They were saying back the blue, they were talking about how important law and order is, and now they go and do something like this. I mean, I can guarantee you almost all of the people who were there were criticizing the Black Lives Matter looting and riots while they're going out to do this. I think a lot of people who support Democrats and are on the left are talking about this, that, and the other. And originally I thought, no, it's stupid. They can't say this. But in hindsight, they're correct in saying what they're saying because, you know, although there have been peaceful protests in support for Trump after he lost the election, there have been, the biggest one has been a massive riot. So, and I think everything Trump's done is going to get completely spoiled by what just happened a couple of days ago. He was able to create peace in the Middle East, create peace with North Korea, and now his ego got the better of him and he completely lost it. I still don't think Trump was a bad president when he was there, but I certainly think it's completely spoiled everything he's done. And I used to have a bit of respect for him, but I think he got so angry about what had been happening with him for the past 4 years, with the left constantly criticizing him, that he wanted to put forward a false agenda about, you know, rigged votes, which even if there was rigged votes, it's impossible for it to be that big of rigged votes. I just think he's completely stupid for what he did. I think the people who are there were completely unpatriotic towards the US. They took down US flags to put up Trump flags. These people, as much as they don't really want to admit it because they're Republicans, a lot of these people there were terrorists, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. But I do have a question for you. How much was this Trump's doing? How much was this Trump's fault, and how much was it down to the rioters and down to the Capitol Police who let them in, basically?
Well, I will say when it happened, there was much less preparation from when the BLM protests were there. I think, though, if Trump had immediately accepted the defeat, none of this would have happened. But he kept on dragging it on. And as soon as he saw people going there, he could have said, no, don't do anything, just go home. It's fine. We'll try to settle this at a different point. If he had done that, he didn't. But he kept on his ego once again took the better of him, and he decided, no, I'm just gonna not say much about it until very late, when so much damage had been done. As you said, 5 people had died, which I think is completely unacceptable from a president.
Yeah. So he does definitely take responsibility, and that's why I've been saying, if Mike Pence does not invoke the 25th Amendment, then Congress needs to be looking to impeach him. Yeah, Cameron.
Well, I think clearly the scenes that we've seen this week in the Capitol are absolutely horrendous, and the PM here in the UK government, and all politicians across the spectrum here in the UK, are absolutely right to not only criticise the scenes that we saw, but the man who instigated those scenes, and that is President Trump. And any respect that I previously had, I'll echo Jose a little bit, any respect I previously had has been completely lost. I mean, it's been like gradually degrading over the last few weeks, and now it's like it's gone. It's totally gone. No respect. He's got to go, and he's got to go swiftly. This impeachment article, I think, is interesting. It could be necessary because 2 weeks left. You don't know what he's going to do. Really, he could do anything, and it could be potentially really dangerous for the developed world. But I don't think it's going to necessarily go anywhere. So we'll have to watch that carefully. And I think it's really disappointing because throughout the last year, the massive divides within American society and within American politics have opened up to the whole world. And this is a beacon of light and hope and democracy in our world that it's been blown out of the water. What we've seen in the last year, it's not the United States of America, it's the divided states of America. And it's got to leave the undemocratic countries like China laughing their heads off at the moment. And it's really a big shame, because right when we need to be showing the strength of democracy, actually what we're seeing is its weaknesses. So clearly we need this move, this transition into Biden to be swift. I think having seen Biden over the last few weeks, I've been assured that he is going to be a solid president, perhaps exactly what they need, a man in the center, an experienced man, fairly establishment. He knows how it goes. And hopefully we can return to some kind of normality in America, and therefore the entire Western developed world can regain its faith and its trust in democracy. I think that's really important moving forward now.
Yeah, but surely, this is kind of a question to all of those who are maybe more on the right of the panel, people who maybe supported Trump before. Surely we have seen this coming. 4 years ago, we saw this coming when in his inauguration, when it was a record low crowd. Surely we've seen where he was such a crazy president, an impossible president, the person who you never expected to be president. Surely from the very start, we saw his inexperience and we saw his far-right agenda coming in. Surely we saw this from the start. 30,000 lies are being counted by independent fact checkers throughout his presidency. Surely we saw this from the start, even when it came to the election. Surely you saw it then when people were saying there was going to be civil disobedience. Surely we saw that, and we shouldn't be shocked by the scenes we saw on Wednesday. This is not a really shocking thing. It's like it's a surprising thing, but it's not. It's not a shocking thing at all. So I just want to kind of open it up to anybody who disagrees with me. Surely you saw this coming.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you someone who did see it coming. Hillary Clinton, in one of her speeches, she said, "We're not only just choosing the President of the United States of America, we're also choosing our Commander-in-Chief of the military," and pretty much everything that follows it. We're not just choosing the Prime Minister of the USA, we're choosing the leader of the free world. We're not just choosing the Prime Minister of America, we're also choosing a beacon of hope and someone that people are supposed to look up to for hope in such times such as these terrible times. And when you see events such as the ones that unfolded this week, you just think, what is going on? And I think it puts it into perspective as well. We in Britain, we're having a tough time. And I heard someone who said, just when you think Britain has gone down, the Americans have raised the bar. And yeah, it's quite unfortunate. And I'd also like to give props to Cameron for what a beautiful speech, mate. It really was, calling out the United States of America, now the divided states of America. And yeah, you spoke really well, mate. A lot of quality points. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I definitely echo that as well. But I'm not sure you directly quoted that because I'm not sure Hillary Clinton would have said the Prime Minister of the United States. But we'll ignore that one.
Oh,
but yeah,
sorry.
you make
Sorry,
some.
my bad.
Yes, you make a good point. We'll just pretend that never
Yeah.
happened. But yeah, you make a very good point. And Jeremy Corbyn was the only kind of leader who didn't meet with Donald Trump. Boris Johnson, Trump called him the Trump of the UK. We'd still have the Trump of the UK inside. That's a different point, but the Trump of the UK is still inside. He's still the power. And the person that incited that violence, the leader of the riot, the organizer of the riot, has the codes, the nuclear codes. They have the nuclear codes. That is truly shocking. For another 12 days, they have the nuclear codes. And that's why impeachment needs to happen. Tommy, yeah.
Yeah, many points. I agree with Cameron. I think we have to start off on how unacceptable of a movement that was from the far right Trump supporters. I'm sure that some of them who maybe lean Trump probably wouldn't have engaged in that, and I think Jose as well. He said that he didn't agree with the movement. I've seen some people saying that guns should have been used as the guns were used at some of the BLM protests. Felix, do you think guns should have been used?
No, but I think they should have been prepared. The mayor of DC asked for the National Guard to be called in, and that didn't happen. I don't know why, and we'll find out in the next few days when there is a proper investigation into this, and only time will tell what the problems were. But they should have had riot police on hand. They should have used more. They used pepper spray, to be fair to them, but they should use more chemical irritants to spray the crowd. When people start getting inside the house of democracy, you have to start thinking in terms of like riot control. We need to stop this. And when people in Congress and elected officials are being threatened and are fearing for their life, calling their parents, saying that they love them, that is what was happening the other day in Congress, and that is truly shocking. And that's when you have to start thinking in terms of policing. Where was the police? And that is one big problem with and one big problem we've seen with this. How easy was it for these protesters? This wasn't a particularly large gathering. Like Black Lives Matter had were the biggest gathering of all time. They didn't get into the Capitol. So why are we seeing this big discrepancy between Black Lives Matter and the protesters the other day? It's a thing that I want to go on to in a bit, but I want to carry on with this point. How involved was Trump? Lily.
This is like slightly going back to the point whether when you said like how did we not see this coming? But I feel like I kind of understand what you're saying, but I feel it is practically impossible for someone to look on, even at the beginning of I was about to say this year, but I meant last year, to say, oh, this was going to happen. But then when you look at the events leading up to it, which you also couldn't have predicted, you kind of can see there's like a pattern of behavior, especially on social media as well. So including Twitter, which kind of, I want to raise like a separate point, is that a lot of celebrities and like politicians have been like calling for like Donald for like Mark Zuckerberg and other like big owners of like massive tech companies like Instagram and Google have been calling for Donald Trump to be banned from these platforms. I just wanted to think if anyone thought that was a good idea or like the right decision, because in my opinion it would be the right decision, because social media is a very powerful tool, and if you use it in the wrong way it can be incredibly destructive, as we've literally seen over the past couple of days.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, Twitter took down that video saying they would incite more violence. So did Facebook, I think. And he's been banned indefinitely by Facebook. And he was taken off Twitter for the last 12 hours, I think. But he's now been reinstated. And we've seen that happen a few times over his premiership. And I think it's definitely an important question to raise. I'll go back to Tommy because he wants to just finish his point, and then I'll maybe move on. Yeah.
Yeah, so just one thing that I saw is that the hypocrisy is a bit on edge, not on edge, a bit more extreme. I think Charlie Kirk, who's one of the far right activists, last November puts out a tweet saying, "Hey liberals, do you notice that when we conservatives lose, we don't riot, burn cars, or assault people? It's amazing how mature and civil we are." I just think that is so funny that it's applicable now with everything that's been happening. And I think, again, like, I could not imagine any other presidents instructing people to raise into like where the main officials are. And I think Trump doesn't have long left, but imagine what he could do in those days that he does have, because he could sabotage it for Biden, and then when Biden has it hard, Trump's going to look back and say, "Hey, I told you so, Biden's bad." So I think we need to probably get rid of him after what we saw.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, let's move on a bit. So I just want to kind of talk about the difference there, because you raised it slightly, between Black Lives Matter and this and the protests that we saw 2 days ago, because there was a stark difference between the policing. We saw people basically letting them through. It was very lackluster, and even once the National Guard were enacted, it took them hours to get there, first of all. And when they got there, they made 60 arrests but the police made 60 arrests. That is not good enough. And especially when you have video evidence, they should be arresting people. They have enough evidence to convict the hundreds of people that got inside the Capitol building. And why are they not doing that? They've called for evidence. People on social media have been like identifying loads and loads of people that were at the protest. Why are they still going free? Peers.
Well, I mean, I'm just going to bring up the unfortunate topics of deaths at these events, because as we know, at the recent riot on Capitol Hill, we got 5 deaths. Is that the count now? Okay, 5 deaths, and that's I think that's the most out of any riot in the last year, and whereas with the BLM protests and occasional riots, most of them were not riots, but some were, and those involved looting. But those BLM riots, not protests, BLM riots and this riot, they're both unacceptable. I mean, the most recent count that I could find was June 8th, 2020, which was only like 2 weeks after George Floyd died, and there were 19 deaths in the BLM riots at that point. So, I mean, as of now, it's probably up to 40 or something, but still, I think what do I think? I think that it's perfectly fine to peacefully protest. I don't like the term peaceful protest, because peaceful implies non-hostility, and these people are hostile to the government. But protests with no looting or any destruction of property, those are fine. I mean, you can do that all you want. But things which involve not only breaking private property, but breaking government property and invading the most important building in the United States, that's pretty extreme, and much worse than any BLM protests that we've seen. And there have been plenty of BLM protests, especially at Washington, D.C. So.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to get more into the differences, though, because you talked about the differences in the two protests, but what about the policing? Caleb?
Yeah, well, what I would say would be the real surprise was not that the Trump supporters were capable of pulling off something like this, but it was that the policing just failed to stop it. And I remember seeing a picture of the Black Lives Matter protest, and you had literally soldiers lined on every step of the Capitol, defending, all with guns and serious weapons. And in this case, you only had about 100, maybe 150 Capitol police officers who usually deal with harmless things like traffic tickets and other things, and parking tickets and things like that. And you had very few of them who were armed, and they were supposed to protect against thousands and thousands of hostile, violent supporters, and there was just no way that was going to work out. And that's why you saw for the first time the Capitol, the most sacred building in the United States, the most sacred building of democracy, was invaded for the first time since the War of 1812. in the year 1814, which is when it was invaded, and that was the real shocking part. And I think I would imagine that government officials intervened in the Black Lives Matter protests to ensure that they had adequate support there to protect against violence. But in this case, obviously, it's Trump supporters. They had no intention to.
Yeah, imagine if it was Black Lives Matter who were saying for months and months on end, the leaders of Black Lives Matter were saying on the, like, whenever they pick a date and they said, oh, we're going to go and protest, there will be thousands of police officers there to make sure nothing happened. And if anybody even stepped over the line, got to go close to a police officer, they could be shot with a rubber bullet. They could have a flashbang thrown at them. They would use tear gas. If this was thousands of black people, what would have happened? If this was thousands of Muslim people, what would have happened? There would have been deaths. There would have been blood seeping down from the Capitol building. And it's a shocking sight to even think about. But that's what would have happened. Let's think about the reality of this. There were people in time who made merchandise, wearing them, saying 6th of January, Civil War. On the date, Civil War. How did they have enough time to make that? And the FBI had intel on this. They told the DC mayor that they had intelligence on this, and I'm pretty sure the DC mayor called for the National Guard to come in. But where was the National Guard? They were nowhere. It took them hours to get there.
So Felix, we want to talk about key differences. And we saw from the Black Lives Matter protest that we had mostly peaceful protesters, and I think we can agree on that. And here in the storming of the Capitol building, I think we should look at the definition of a terrorist, and I think the definition would be something along the lines of someone who seeks to incite violence or terror into anyone. And that is what is happening here. Not only are we having violence and terror, we're having it inside one of the most important government buildings in the world, and that is the most important thing to see. So the stark difference in response between peaceful protesters mostly and terrorists is apparent. I mean, we're talking not just people peacefully protesting. We've seen videos of police officers shooting rubber pellets into people who are standing in their own homes, people who are in their own offices just because they're recording and they don't want to see the injustices that the police are causing. Here in the storming of the Capitol building, we just have a few police donnies just outnumbered, and the response is not enough. I mean, if you can shoot rubber pellets at people standing inside their own homes, inside their own offices, I don't see why you can't shoot rubber pellets or something of less magnitude, such as gas, into a crowd of those storming one of the most important government buildings. And that is the key response. That is unjust to say just because it's Trump supporters or BLM supporters. I think there's a stark difference in here. And we can go into the chat about racism if you like. But that, I think, those are the key points I would pretty much.
I don't want to do that now because I want to focus on the Capitol building. But research said 98% of Black Lives Matter protesters were peaceful. But with that, let's go into a new meeting. I'll just send it over the invite.
Also, could I get just one last point? Also, them lot at the Capitol weren't arrested. We had Omar Jimenez of CNN arrested for just standing and doing his report on the news, and we have people who are not arrested storming a building. What's going on here? Like, a man's reporting, doing his job, and those are not storming the building.
Right. Thank you, Rajan. That was a really good point. And I think just kind of finishing off on that Black Lives Matter point, Blue Lives Matter was a cover-up for racism. That's what we've learned. A police officer lost his life due to these protests and riots that were incited by Donald Trump. Does that mean Donald Trump could be found guilty for conspiring to commit murder? Probably not, but it's still something to think about. And senators and Democratic senators have been talking about this impeachment. Ilhan Omar, one of the part of the squad, they're called, they're like a group of progressives from the Democrats, have been talking about this. They've already written the impeachment bill. So that could be coming out, and they've said it could come out as soon as Monday if Mike Pence does not invoke the 25th Amendment. What is the 25th Amendment?
All right, so the 25th Amendment is a bill which declares if the president is unfit for power in either physical or mental states, then he'll be overtaken by the vice president. And then I think it carries on down the list, but it's never really gone past the vice president. I don't even know if it's happened before. Someone might need to fact check that, but yeah, that's what the 25th Amendment is.
Yeah, I mean, people have been calling for Mike Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment. He would need half of Donald Trump's cabinet to agree to it, which is why I've been quite angry over the last few days seeing cabinet members resign. Some of them more irrelevant, like the special envoy to Ireland, although he was his former chief of staff, so had a lot bigger role. But we have seen these, I think it's over six resignations now from the cabinet. People in Congress have said if the 25th Amendment is not invoked this weekend, then they will start the process for impeachment. Is it worth impeaching Donald Trump with 12 days to go? I think yes, because he has shown he's dangerous and he's deluded. He would not condemn those protesters. He said, "I love them, you are special." That is not a president fit to run. That is a dangerous president. And people from all political aisles have been starting to echo this. And I only think it's when you really get up close and personal with these Trump supporters, the Republicans in the Capitol that day did. That's when you start to realize the real dangers of Donald Trump. And that is why the impeachment still needs to happen. It also sends a clear message to any other potential presidents, people maybe like Kanye West who think they can run for president. If you break the law, you will be held accountable. And I think that is what is very important, and that's why I support it. But I'm sure people are going to disagree. Daniel.
Well, I see very little point in doing that, as Trump's only got 12 days left in office. What I think now is the best thing to do is just to have peace for 12 days, get ready for the transition of power and rebuild America.
I'm going to interrupt you here because surely, if there needs to be Donald Trump, although he might he might have agreed to a peaceful transition of power, his supporters have not, and that is the danger for me. Do you not agree, or do you think it's still pointless?
Well, I mean, no, not really, because Trump supporters are very angry about all of this, so Democratic election, but there's really no point in going to the effort of impeaching him, having everyone vote again, and what happens if this happens again? If his far right supporters storm the Capitol building again because they're trying to impeach him, we just need to try and have peace until Biden becomes president. That's just my point.
I just think that's slightly unrealistic with what we've seen over the last few days and over the last few years as well. Are we really going to get peace with President Donald Trump, who is a crazy tweeter, who'll go out on tweet rampages, and that will infuriate his followers? That's what happens when you lie to half the population for a few weeks about an election. He has lied to his supporters for weeks on weeks on weeks, and they're starting to get angry because they live in an alternate universe. Can you imagine? You do not think that you think this election is rigged? That is just crazy for me to even understand. I don't think a peaceful transition is going to happen in the next 12 days. And that's why I still think that we need impeachment. Cameron.
Well, I can see Daniel's point in that it would be great to just have a peaceful couple of weeks and a nice smooth transition. However, it would have been great to have a peaceful last 4 years and a nice smooth last 4 years, but it hasn't happened, has it? It's unrealistic, and you can't just say let's have peace and those three words they create peace. It's not going to happen either. And I am seriously worried about the dangers that Donald Trump could pose on this world, on this developed world, on America. I mean, the country has gone through so much in the last year. As I said before, we are talking about a seriously divided country. It needs healing. However, it needs healing now and not in 14 days. So I would not at all oppose an impeachment trial for Donald Trump in the next few days. I think it could be an important step forward and a clean break as well, because it would be essentially saying this man has broken the law. We are going to reject him. We are going to reject the politics of hatred, the politics of division, and we are going to move into a more united world where we can stand up and we can defend democracy and say we are the beacon of hope in a pretty damaged, divisive world at the moment. And I think that's a really important step forward for America and for the whole world.
Yeah, and just really well put there, I think, again. And when we have QAnon supporters, when we have alt-right, far-right extremists turning up to Trump rallies, you know something's wrong. And I don't want to go too technically down some rabbit hole, but I do want to talk about this idea of the Overton window, which is talked about a lot in political science, where basically you have this kind of idea where the public will accept most ideas, and it's generally quite central, right? You've got a bit of left and a bit of right. But the only way to shift this Overton window is to go with something so shocking, and then you see a shift. It's like, imagine gay marriage. If you call for gay marriage, it might not happen straight away, but then you start to accept like gay people, and then eventually you get gay marriage. And that's what's happened with Trump. It's a terrible comparison, obviously, but it's the same sort of thing. As soon as we start moving right, people like Fox News, people like Alex Jones, people like Jordan Peterson, people in America, and of course Jordan Peterson's Canadian, but you understand the fear that is being stoked. People, Tucker Carlson, talking about like sending people away, calling them gypsies, stuff like that. He's a plain racist, hidden over this intellectual veil on Fox, and Fox is another part to play in this. Although they have been a bit fairer on the election coverage, they still have a part to play in this. Caleb.
I mean, look, Donald Trump should have been impeached a year ago. I mean, that's my belief. I think that's the belief of most people in this panel. But at this point, I think impeachment is more of a political move than anything else. I mean, assuming that there's no threat of Donald Trump launching a nuclear assault, which I don't know if you've seen, but there was a news report that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer had consulted with like the chief general about it, you know, making sure that nothing like this was going to happen. And really, the purpose is to expose the Republicans who still will defend Trump after this insane attack, and put them on the spot. Obviously, you still have the Republicans, shameless Republicans, who continue to object the election results, even after even after the attack, and yeah, they want to expose the Republicans because they know Republicans are now in this climate dependent on Trump's base to win in elections, and if they can get them to vote one way or the other, that can divide up the support.
Yeah, and you make a good point. People like Ted Cruz who are playing politics, and even after people invaded the Capitol, even after that, Ted Cruz still objected to it. And Ted Cruz is not a stupid guy. He knows what he's doing, and he knows the election was not rigged. Deep down, he's a clever person, and he's playing politics with this. He is trying to get that Trump fan base to him, and he is trying eventually probably to get the president spot. That's what he really wants, and it's disgusting that he could use it even after the Capitol there was a riot inside the Capitol. Jose.
Well, firstly, I will say, in my opinion, because I'm more right-leaning, I think it's better off Pence uses the 25th Amendment, so you can at least try see what he can do as a in the presidential position to see for future time. But I don't know completely. I do think Trump needs to leave. He just needs to get out. I think that Ben Shapiro, before the election, said that everything Trump's done, the reason he was voting for him was everything bad that Trump has, he's practically already put in place. And I thought he was correct in that, but now I've realized he was completely wrong. And Trump has a massive ego, but I didn't think his ego would come to the point of taking the better of his own nation, of his own position, which is probably one of the worst things. I thought he was an honest person before. I thought he was completely
I'm gonna have
Fair.
to object because that's just not true. 30,000 lies it's now tallied up to. Independent fact
No,
checkers
what I
say
mean,
that. He is not an
more
honest
so.
person.
What I mean,
No, he is
so more.
not an honest person. That is a ridiculous statement to make.
I think he
After
meant Ben
3 years of Trump,
Shapiro.
you should have realized that he is not an honest person. He is a liar. He is a liar. That is
Well,
all
he
Donald
may
Trump is. He is a fool, he is a liar, and he is a baby, and he cannot even accept the election result. That is a ridiculous statement to make. Carry on.
Trump's not very honest, but I at least thought he was a patriot and cared a lot for his country. But it's just not. It's just isn't how it ended up.
If
So
Trump,
yeah,
if Trump was a patriot, if he cared about his country, then he would resign tomorrow. And
I know that's my
had 4
point.
years
Before
to
what
do that.
happened, a couple of days ago, I thought even with the elections, I thought, you know what, I think he's a patriot, but with everything he's trying to do, but I don't think now I think he's just too egocentric, cares too much about himself, doesn't care about the people, and just need to get him out for someone else.
Yeah.
Anyone really.
Piers.
Well, I was going to say, invoking the 25th, or I mean, it's sort of like Cameron's point, but invoking the 25th Amendment is all fine, but that would just it would just inflame these rioters further. If, like, Trump is out, he still has power. He's a moderately successful businessman, and he is a billionaire. He can make these people his soldiers if they want. I mean, it's really a risk.
Yeah, I mean, how can the man who incites
to do that?
How can?
But it's a risk to keep him in as well. So
yeah, but how can somebody who incite a deadly riot have the codes, the nuclear codes? That's my question. God, there was too much. Cameron.
Yeah, well, I wanted to respond to Jose's point a little bit because, of course, I'm someone of the right as well. There's no doubting that, and I personally detest the idea of Mike Pence being president. I think he's one of the most uninspiring people I've ever watched. I think it's important we start to have these conversations about the future because the Republican Party is, of course, in a pretty dire state now. It's lost any kind of image, and it's also lost credibility because of the events that we've seen this week. But I think what's important is that we put the Trump administration behind us. I think the Republican Party has to do that. It has to move forward and look for new, fresh faces, and put the last 4 years totally behind them because it has been it's been difficult, not relatable at all, and I think you can see it's resulted in the divided America that I've been talking about. And I think it's important now the Republican Party, like the Democrats actually have in the last year, pull together around one candidate who they believe can help to unite America. And I think it's important that the Republican Party doesn't play politics in the next 4 years, but actually helps out the Democrats in reuniting America. And I mean, obviously, I'm not talking about it policy or legislation perspective, but about the general idea. We're talking about a divided country, as I have been talking about all day. I'm not going to go on again. It's important that all sides of the political spectrum, the right, the left, the centre, all come together and say, you know, we're friends, we're neighbours, we're not enemies. Why are we fighting each other in the streets? It's not right in a developed country or in a democracy for that to be happening. And so that's the role politics will play in the next few years, in my view.
But who is that candidate? And again, if Trump were to run in 2024, whether it's under the Republicans or under like an independent, he would get votes. There is now a big enough cult, I suppose you'd call it, that rallies around Donald Trump. And even when he lies, even when he incites a riot, they do not move positions at all. They still back Donald Trump. And that, I'd say that's in the tens of millions, maybe, the people that like religiously back Trump. Jose.
Well, a couple of things. Firstly, Trump, if he does run in 2024 as an independent, will be extremely dangerous for the Republicans because, as you mentioned, Trump will have a lot of support and the Republicans and those people who usually vote Republican will end up saying to themselves, you know what, I prefer Trump, so they're going to move all their votes from Republicans to Trump. But leading on from Cameron, I forgot who it was, but there was a Democrat member, I think it was either in the Senate or in Congress, who just took out a beer and said that people just need to sit down, take the time to speak to each other and just enjoy a beer, which is just what people need to do right now. I think that when 40 years ago, when Ronald Reagan beat Jimmy Carter, you didn't see people going around trying to riot. They just said, you know what, it's fine, we'll live on with life. When did that change? Why did that change? We have to ask ourselves that question. We have to think to ourselves, how do we fix that? And as Cameron said, we need to find a candidate that both sides will like, both sides will understand, not with policies, but as a person. Trump is his ego is so big that you just can't ever want to listen to the Democrats. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you make the valid and vital point that this election was about character. It was not about policies. It does not matter if Joe Biden was pushing some radical policy, or the same with Trump. It was about character. And that is what we've learned. They care more about character, and that is important. And we've learned now that character is important when you're voting for a candidate. And we did not see that in 2016 when Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton. I'll go to Tommy just because he's responding, and then Piers, and then wrap it up.
I think when it changed is when social media became the main form of communication for politics. I think the Twitter age, I guess you could call it, the Trump age, for politics debates. Like, yeah, it used to be good old fashioned in the newspapers, out in the streets, on the podiums, like the pedestals. Like one of the Republicans stole them and managed to sell it for 80 grand on eBay. But yeah, it's now on Twitter, and I think people are becoming too radicalized by what they see. They're believing too much, and they need to go back to school. That if they believe everything that they read online from Twitter, I think it's not a very good sign of what's going to come, because everyone needs to come together right now more than ever. We need to accept, hey, how can we help our new president and work under him to make the country a better place than what it was for the last 4 years? Not let's try and make it worse just so we can do a ha-ha at the liberals.
You make two very, very important points, and very good points, very well put. Again, and I think that's definitely important. And I really do want to talk more on this podcast about the radicalization on social media, because that is becoming a big threat in politics. I want to finish now with Piers, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, well, there's a reason that the American politics has become so partisan and divided over the last 30 years. It's because America doesn't see itself as having a competitor, because the reason that the 20th century was called America's century by some people is because they had a significant enemy the whole way through, the Soviet Union, and that way the Democratic and Republican Party could stay friendly rivals, but know that they have to do everything to stop the Soviet Union from winning. And now that the Soviet Union is gone, the Americans don't America and the political parties don't see themselves as having anyone to fight, and so they've decided to go after each other, which is called and abandon their friendly rivalry. When in reality, China's been rising very quickly over the last 30 years, and the Democratic and Republican parties haven't, well, while acknowledging it, haven't really responded to it all that great. And what they need to do now, if they really want to unite and regain that friendly rivalry with their different positions and such, they need to unite against China. And we'll have to see if Joe Biden manages to do that. I mean, so some of the before the election, some of these rioters that have stormed the Capitol, they're saying Joe Biden's gonna sell the country to China. And well, I mean, I don't know much about his relations with China, but well, I'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I saw that smile there, Cameron. You would definitely like to see that happen. Thank you, everybody. Really, thank you for turning up today. There was a big panel today. It's very hard to get around to you all, but I think we did that quite well, and that was a really interesting episode. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.